We're going to tie a little yellow Sally or a little yellow stone. Little yellow Sally, sometimes you'll hear as a name of a pattern that imitates a little yellow stone, and we see these falling like snow on some summer evenings, and they're just starting to go right now, but it's a really prolific bug all around the west. Little yellow stonefly. I'm going to use a little bit longer shank hook, as you'll see with most stonefly adults and nymphs for that matter. 200R 16, some 8/0 yellow thread. Crank that on there, and a lot of times when these are really available to the fish, they're in their egg laying stage, so they've got a little red butt to them. So I'm going to tie this thread quite a ways back on the hook and just take an absolute tiny bit, just a tiny bit of red dubbing and twist that on, and that's probably too much even though it's just a few fibers. This just needs to be a couple of turns. It's a red butt. And now I'm going to take some yellow dubbing. This is just a fine and dry, a really light yellow dry fly dubbing. Anything will work. Twist that on. And I've got this 3X long hook, so it's quite a bit of dubbing. That still might be too much, but I'm going to come forward. A pretty thin body. These stoneflies do not crawl out. They freely emerge, which is not normally the case for stonefly. When you think of stoneflies, you think of the cases. You see them on the bank, but these freely emerge just like a mayfly. So they have a real thin, skinny body, and I'm going to try to replicate that in my dubbing. So there's the red butt, yellow body. Next is the wing, and I'm going to take a couple of CDC fibers, and I think this Super Select CDC is just great. Spirit River makes it, Wapsi makes it. You can use dun, you could use white, you could use a white and natural mix. The dun is kind of a good all-around mix. These feathers have a slight natural curve to them, and I don't want to use this curve up like that. That's not going to lay down. So I'm thinking about making that CDC lay down. So use the natural curve of the feather and try to marry those two equidistant this way and both curving with the feather naturally down. Clump them together, and this is just like a caddis wing. I want it roughly the length of the hook shank. That wing on the stonefly will sometimes lay back even slightly further, so a little longer is fine. And I don't have to crank on this CDC like I do with deer hair. It'll lay on there pretty good, and then if I need to adjust it just a bit, I can do that. And that's really way too long, so I'll just pull that in just a little bit, and there's going to be my wing, and I'm trying to get it to lay down flat. That's the trick here. Some pressure on it and keep it laying down. CDC with this pattern is not going to be the only thing that's keeping this bug up in terms of flotation. So it's a low floater, but so is the natural, so we've got to play that. I'm going to take a ginger hackle. It's just a saddle hackle, good small stiff ginger hackle. I'm going to tie it in just after the wing. Now I'm going to develop a little bit of a thorax coming forward. Again, just a tiny bit of dubbing. This is a small hook, a small fly. It doesn't take hardly anything. We want to keep it skinny. And you see this bug around, whether it be drifting alongside you or falling from the sky, as you often do in the summer. That is really, really thin, and you see the four-wing silhouette flying, and then when it hits the water, it's really flat. So I'm going to take a little bit of dubbing up front of the thorax, and now just a few turns of that ginger hackle. Now this is where I might get a little flotation out of this good stiff hackle. That's 3 wraps. 4, that's probably too many. I'll stick with 3.5. And I'm going to clip the bottom of this off after I'm done with it to allow the fly to lay flat again. So that's the idea here. I often fish these in big flats. You get fish feeding somewhat selectively in a it's a really small bug is a nice pattern. A really small, low-lying pattern is more effective than, say, like a standard yellow elk-haired caddis, which will fish for this, but it's not as stealthy or as low riding. So there's my Little Yellow Sally CDC wing. Now I'm going to just take and cut the bottom hackle right off and check and make sure that's flat. Now that whole thing's going to lay down flat. And that's our CDC winged Little Yellow Sally female with the egg sac.